Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for March 19th already. It's the 19th. March 19th is the 78th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, 79th in leap years, with 287 days remaining to the end of the year. I'd like to take a moment to mention that links to my sources are included in the show notes. I ask you to go ahead and click that like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and remember that you can share this video with others with the link in your email messaging or social media. There's a link in the show notes to my This Day in History playlist, and I think it goes right up there in that corner. I'll link it up there in the corner for you. And with that, we're going to start on March 19th, 1649. When the House of Commons of England passed an act abolishing the House of Lords, declaring it useless and dangerous to the people of England. Obviously, sentiments have changed since then because the House of Lords does exist now. Could have had something to do with the fact that back then a position in the House of Lords was actually inherited, and now such positions are appointed. Positions in the House of Commons are elected. Back in the 1600s, a French explorer and fur trader named Robert Cavalier de La Salle, often just referred to as La Salle, explored the Great Lakes region of the United States and Canada and the Mississippi River down to the Gulf of Mexico. Apparently, there was some conflict with part of his traveling party. Some of them mutinied, first up around the Great Lakes in about 1680, and then again down along the Gulf Coast some 7 years later. I have yet to learn exactly why these guys mutinied on these two separate occasions, but on March 19th, 1687, La Salle was ambushed and murdered by one of his own men. And I'm thinking, oh my, why did this happen? I haven't been able to locate the motivation for these mutinies or the murder, but if I find out, I'll let you know. This is the birthday of Wyatt Earp, born March 19th, 1848. He was an American businessman and law enforcement officer back in the days of the American Wild West. He was all over that American Old West: Wichita, Dodge City, Kansas, Texas, Tombstone, and the Arizona Territory. And he took part in the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. Quite a guy, Wyatt Earp. In his later years, he moved to Los Angeles, where he got to know and work with some of the early Western actors in Hollywood. Wyatt Earp died in Los Angeles in 1929 when he was 80 years old. Speaking of cowboys, this is the birthday of Charles Marion Russell, born March 19, 1864. Also known as C.M. Russell, Charlie Russell, Kid Russell, or the cowboy artist. He was an artist of the American Old West and created more than 2,000 paintings of cowboys, Native Americans, and landscapes, as well as bronze sculptures. Nice work. So when you're looking at art, look for that artist's signature, and if you see the name Russell, consider whether it might be the work of Charles Marion Russell, whose birthday is today. And if you're ever in or around the area of Great Falls, Montana, look for the C.M. Russell Museum Complex, where you can see some of his artworks, personal objects, and artifacts. There's also a couple of museums here in Fort Worth that have some of Russell's work. He lived to the age of 62. Brothers Auguste and Louis Lumière recorded their first footage on March 19, 1895, using their newly patented cinematograph. That is a mouthful of words, cinematograph. In 1918, the United States Congress established time zones and approved daylight saving time on March 19, 1918. This is the birthday of actor Patrick McGoohan, born March 19, 1928. He's got credits on stage, screen, and television. He's had a lot of acting roles that many of us in the U.S. may or may not have seen or even heard of, but he did have a part in the movie Ice Station Zebra, and I also remember him as a particularly insidious villain in an episode of Columbo. Patrick McGoohan died in 2009 at the age of 80. Nevada legalized gambling on March 19, 1931. The Academy Awards was shown on television for the first time on March 19, 1953. Elvis Presley made a down payment on the Graceland mansion on March 19, 1957. Bob Dylan released his first album on March 19, 1962. The United States House of Representatives began broadcasting its day-to-day business via the cable television network C-SPAN on March 19, 1979. On March 19, 2003, the United States, along with coalition forces primarily from the United Kingdom, initiated war in Iraq. Well, I sure remember that. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you learned something you didn't know before. As always, links to my sources are included in the show notes, and I'll be sure and add a link to that Day in History playlist up in the corner there. I know there are a few missing episodes from last year's lineup, but if there is one for March 19th, I'll put that up there about now also. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share if you found this interesting or entertaining or informative. Hope you learned something you didn't know before. Did I already say that? Yep, I did. Okay. Alrighty. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. I forgot a word today. Well, we'll cut that part out because I don't have a word. We'd have to look it up. Dadgummit. Okay, well, we'll cut that part out. Cut that one out. Snip it right out. Thank goodness for editing. 95, Mississippi. Okay, we'll do that in a minute. All right, let's back that up just a little bit. The Volkswagen microbus, so many mistakes. I don't know how all that's going to go together, or if it's even going to make it to the video. We'll just see. That's not going to go. Probably cut all that out. That'll all be laying on the cutting room floor. So I'll just do that whole thing over. That might not make it into the video. We'll see. Changing it up.